Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. So this is going to be an interesting episode. Couple things going on. First off, we're kind of in the middle of Pro Tour Aether Revolt at the time of recording. So just to kind of put this in context for you, we're in the middle of day 2. We're looking at the second series of standard rounds at this point, so we're getting close to the top 8. You're going to notice a couple of interesting things in this week's Market Watch. There's going to be cards, of course, that will be influenced by what we see this weekend, and some have already probably started to be influenced by the results of the Pro Tour, but some are going to be on hold at least until we get to the top 8. But definitely after Sunday, when folks see the top 8, there is going to be an increase in interest in certain cards, I have no doubt. So we actually will be doing a special edition of the Market Watch at the beginning of this coming week that will focus mainly on Aether Revolt cards and how they are being adjusted accordingly to what we saw over the course of the weekend. Having said that, this is going to be the regular edition of the Market Watch, but I have started to incorporate the Aether Revolt cards into it as well. Now, before we get started, as always, a couple quick reminders. If you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to support us and what we do. One of those ways is the Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases through any links that are on that store, a small percentage comes back to the channel. That's greatly appreciated. All the cards you see today on the Market Watch are available on there, as well as sealed product for Aether Revolt and all sorts of other stuff. Also, our Patreon page, another great way to support us. You'll find links to that below too. And I've just updated the Patreon page, so if you have checked it out but haven't looked at it in a while, I do recommend that you check it out again. There are some new goals, some new rewards, and as a matter of fact, one of the rewards we added for the $5 and more tiers are this Angel token, which is I'm very excited about. This is going to be a free gift to any patron at the $5 or higher level. And this is a classic art token that I worked on for a really long time because I wanted to create a gift for the patrons. So just something to say thank you. It's a small token, if you will. No pun intended. Okay, kind of intended, of my appreciation. So having said all that, let's get into the cards. We're going to start off with standard, and let's look at the cards that lost value this week. Coming in number 5 is Aetherworks Marvel, down 54 cents to $5.95. This one's an interesting one. A couple things with this card. First off, it's a Kaladesh card. It is a mythic, but it's been opened a whole bunch at this point. So even if the card does excel and start to do really well again in standard, I can't see it climbing more than maybe $8, $9, at least in the short term, right? So here's what's interesting though. What I've seen so far at the Pro Tour, there's no big push for this card like we've seen in the previous standard. However, there are some copycat decks running this, and it's kind of a different twist on copycat. It's just another way to just assemble the combo as fast as possible. And it looks actually pretty interesting. Here's the thing though, at least at this point in the Pro Tour now, we aren't at the top 8 yet, and that's going to make a big difference, of course, once we get to Sunday. But it looks like Mario Vehicles decks are at least providing a fair amount of resistance to these copycat decks. So copycat might not be as dominant as a lot of people thought going into the Pro Tour. And if that's the case, this card might start to fall off. But if we do see a copy or two in the top 8, I have no doubt a lot of folks will look to pick it up, at least in the coming week. Coming in number 4 is Ishkana Graft Widow, down 55 cents to $8.40. This is a card that's still seeing play in the Golgari Delirium decks, and they are pretty popular now. I will argue that this card maybe isn't as prevalent in all the deck builds as it was in the old standard, but it's still there. It's still doing good work. Coming in number 3 is Chandra Torture Defiance, down 61 cents to $20.99. Another card that's seeing a little bit of play at the Pro Tour. Nothing that's super overwhelming in most decks, but she does have a presence there. Coming in at number 2 is Archangel Avacyn, down 66 cents to $18.46. I think Archangel Avacyn has potential to maybe rebound again at some point, but at least right now she's on the decline a little bit. She does combo really well with Walking Ballista, so you do want to keep that in mind for the future. And finally, coming in at number 1 is Ajani Unyielding, down 69 cents to $8. I talked about this card at length last Monday in our Aether Revolt special, and I'll briefly kind of mention what I mentioned there. This is a good card. It's doing work in standard. It's great in the Selesnya tokens decks, but because it's a 6 casting cost Planeswalker and 2 on color, you're not going to be seeing lots of these running around the environment, right? You're not going to want 4 of these in your decks, and most decks are running 1 and 2 if they're in those Selesnya token builds, right? So because of that, this card is not going to skyrocket into the $10, $15, $20 range anytime soon, right? This is the type of card that even if it's successful and is doing what it's supposed to do in Standard, it's still going to be probably a $6 to $8 card. And that's what we're seeing now. It's just sort of dropping down after its pre-release hype to really where it belongs probably in the market. All right, so before we get to the cards that are hot right now, I just want to take a moment to reflect on a couple of our friends that are no longer with us in Standard, but they will always be in the Standard in our hearts. And the first one is Smuggler's Copter, down 54 cents this week to 457. Just wanted to kind of show this card because I wanted to just point out it's not completely bottoming out, and it's probably due to the fact that it does see play in some other formats. Commander, it's really cool there. Frontier, definitely sees a lot of play there. So this card isn't going to drop down to like $1 or $2, I don't think, but it is steadily dropping. It's become much more affordable. And of course, Emrakul, the Promised End, down $1.08 to $12.34. Kind of the same story here. As long as there's some folks interested in Frontier, it's going to be able to hold some value. And again, this is a card that has potential in other formats too. All right, let's move on to the hot cards in Standard this week. And like I said at the top of the show, you're going to see some really interesting things here. You're going to see some cards that were speculated on this week that, at least at this point in the Pro Tour, and we're pretty far along, don't really appear to be panning out, unfortunately. Coming at number 5 is Mind Rack Demon, and this is up $1.38 to $3.82. So the mindset with this card at the beginning of this week was, you know what, these Delirium Golgari decks are doing really well. They could do well at the Pro Tour, and this card just seems to fit perfectly in that style of deck. There were some decks running some copies of this that were out there the first couple weeks of Standard. However, the downside is a lot of the pros that played those decks didn't really feel like this card was performing that well. And at least at this point, most of the Golgari decks seemingly have cut them. So yes, it did see a little bit of a spike, but I think this is about to start trending right back down. Coming in number 4 is Inspiring Statuary, up $2.25 to $4. Pretty big percentage increase this week for this card, and there's a couple things going on here. First off, it's awesome in Commander. There's a lot of Commander players trying to pick up a copy of this card to play around with this, and another card that we're also going to see on the list a little bit later. Secondly, Saffron Olive over on MTG Goldfish does awesome brews and does some amazing budget brews. And he did a couple this week, over the last couple weeks actually. And one of them in particular was a improvised deck featuring this card. And I think once those decks get out there, especially on MTG Goldfish, they have a large audience and a lot of folks start picking up those budget brews. And, you know, with the current price of a lot of the cards out there, especially when you're around Pro Tour time, it's very intriguing to pick up a budget deck and be able to play in Friday Night Magic or play with your friends. So some of these budget cards all of a sudden start to see a little bit of a spike. And we saw this around the Pro Tour last time, and we're seeing it again this time. So I think that's an interesting trend to watch for in the future too. But really cool card that definitely has potential in the long term of Standard. It's just entered Standard, and Improvise is definitely a possibility going forward. Coming in at number 3 is Disallow, and this is up $2.34 to $7.30. Now, unlike the previous card, which hasn't really shown much of anything of the Pro Tour, this card is all over the Pro Tour. Fantastic control card, and it fits into so many different types of control decks. There's Dimir control decks, there's Izzet control decks, there's also a Copycat deck, which basically is a control deck that's just trying to use Copycat as its win condition. So because of that, Disallow is going to be very popular for some time to come. As long as these control decks can hang in the meta like they are now, this card is definitely going to be a thing. The versatility it brings is just incredible. It's a counterspell, but it can also deal with activated and triggered abilities, so it deals with Planeswalker, triggers, and stuff like that very nicely. Coming in at number 2, Tezzeret's Simulacrum, up $3.02 to $3.25. This one's an interesting one. Okay, so you may ask yourself, this card had a pretty big percentage increase. Is it doing well in the Pro Tour? Well, the answer is no. It hasn't shown up pretty much at all at the Pro Tour. So what's the story behind this card? Basically, heavy speculation going into the Pro Tour. This card fits into a couple situations. Improvise is a big one. If you have an Improvise deck, for example, with Tezzeret from the main set, could actually be a pretty interesting brew, right? And some folks were trying to brew around that. And unfortunately, it just never really panned out and got there, at least not in time for the Pro Tour. So this card hasn't really done anything. But the issue especially is this is not a card you can get in the regular Aether Revolt set. You have to pick up the Tezzeret Planeswalker pack, which is about $15. I mean, you can pick them up at just about any Target or Walmart or your LGS, right? So they're not hard to find. If you do, you get 3 copies of this card in that deck. So they're not really rare or very difficult to get a hold of, but on the secondary market where people do a lot of their purchases for singles to build their decks, there's not a whole ton of copies flooded out there because you don't have a lot of retailers breaking that product open to sell a bunch of singles. I mean, there's a little bit of demand for the Tezzeret Master Metal, but that's pretty much it. So once they kind of exhaust that demand, they don't need to open any more of those particular products, right? So because of that, you look at the marketplace and this card looks pretty dry on the marketplace. You add that with the speculation and the brews that were going on prior to the Pro Tour. This thing sees a nice little jump, but unfortunately, I think it's about to go back down. And coming in at number 1 is Paradox Engine of $472 to $1135. Almost the exact same story here as Inspiring Statuary, which we saw earlier in the countdown. Same drivers are behind this card as that one. First off, awesome in Commander, especially with Statuary. Great combo. A lot of folks are already brewing around that in Commander. Secondly, a lot of thought going into how this card could be utilized in the Pro Tour, that this could be one of those breakout cards. And then again, Saffron Olive on MTG Goldfish went ahead and had a really awesome budget brew, actually a different budget brew than the Inspiring Statuary deck I was talking about earlier. And again, those budget brews can be pretty hot, especially around a time where people are a little weary of picking up cards that could potentially go down in value after the Pro Tour, or perhaps could spike, and they may need to pick up something for a deck that has actually already spiked now. So there is attention on those budget decks, and this card just kind of fit the role at the time. Now, having said that, I do think there is still long-term potential for this card. I do think it's going to go down because it hasn't really done anything this weekend at the Pro Tour. But once it does go down, maybe think about picking up some copies, just because I do think there's potential in the future. The raw power levels here, and as the meta shifts and evolves and maybe the next set comes out, this card could definitely at some point see play in Standard, I have no doubt. All right, let's move on to Modern, and we'll look at the cards that lost value first. You'll notice there's at least a few cards on here that are potential reprints for Modern Masters 2017, and at least are being speculated around at this point. And folks are going to kind of hold their breath and wait a little longer until we see what's actually in that set. Coming in number 5, Rings of Bright Hearth, down $1.81 to $26. This card actually spiked not too long ago. It's a pretty big Commander card, and definitely when the Commander 2016 decks came out, there's a lot of focus on Commander, so this card did see a little bit of an increase. I think it's just stabilizing now. Coming in number 4 is Brushland, 10th edition version, down $1.88 to $16.34. This card's gone up and down. Aesthetically, this appears to be maybe the favorite of all the versions of Brushland for players. This seems to be the most sought after one of all of them, including the original Ice Age one, which confuses me a little bit because I do feel like, at least from a rarity point of view, it's probably harder to find the Ice Age one, but players are gravitating towards this particular one, especially for the Bant Eldrazi decks that have been very good. But again, the meta is changing a little bit, and because of that, I think we're seeing a little bit of a dip in this card. Coming in number 3 is Verdant Catacombs, down $2.03 to $67.99. $1 million question: will we see the enemy-colored fetch lands in Modern Masters 2017? For the most part, I'd say no. There's a chance, because Wizards has done some crazy stuff recently with reprints, and you never want to underestimate their ability to surprise and shock. But at the same time, I don't really see them showing up in this particular release. I see them coming sometime in the future, but I do think it's going to be in a standard release, which would be better for players anyway, because it does mean more copies out there. So I guess we'll wait and see, but this one in particular has been a little bit soft recently. Just again, a lot of it has to do with the changes in the meta and what color decks are popular right now, so Verdant Catacombs has been slowly decreasing. Coming in at number 2 is Doubling Season from Ravnica, down $2.40 to $59.99. This card saw a huge increase in popularity recently due to the Commander 2016 releases. The Breed Lethality deck was incredibly hot and is actually very hard to find at this point, and can run you upwards to around $70, $80, believe it or not, in the secondary market. And this card isn't even included in that deck. But because this card was basically a no-brainer upgrade for that deck, there was huge attention on this this and also the Modern Masters version of it recently. So now it's starting to stabilize back down again. But quite honestly, this card is a huge fan favorite, great commander card. And the fact of the matter is, I don't see this dropping below maybe $55 at the minimum, right? So this is a card that could be reprinted in Modern Masters, sure. But if it doesn't, this is going to keep going up. And coming in at number 1, Tarmogoyf. Couple versions we're going to look at this week. The Modern Masters 2015 version down $288 to $119.99. The Future Sight version down $344 to $136.96. The other Modern Masters version also went down a little bit this week, but it was around $1, so I didn't include it here. But it just goes to show you just how soft the market is right now for Tarmogoyfs. There's high speculation that it's going to be in the set. I mean, it was in the first 2 Modern Masters. It was kind of the marquee card for both of those sets. Now, this time around, I think Liliana is going to be the marquee card. However, it would have been easy for Wizards to just take this out and replace it with Liliana. But my thought is, because Modern Masters 2015 in some ways was a disappointment to players, I think they're going to try to bring this set back up to the level of the original Modern Masters. Maybe not quite that good, but I do think you're going to see a little bit of a push in the cards that are included this time around versus last time. And because of that, I don't think they're going to take out Tarmogoyf. We'll know soon enough, but this card is going to continue to be soft until we get that answer. All right, let's move on to the top 5 modern cards that gained value this week. And a lot of the focus this week is going to be around the Pure Steel Paladin deck, which has now been named Cheerios, which is kind of fun. And if you're wondering why that is, there's a lot of zero casting cost equipment, artifacts in the set. So zeros are like Cheerios. So there you go. Now, today we're actually going to look at the top 6 cards instead of the top 5 cards. And the reason I did that is because number 6 on the list is Pure Steel Paladin. It's up $342 to $17.90, and I just wanted to showcase this because this is a card that is influencing a number of other cards on the top 5. Coming in at number 5 is Ruined Halo, up $379 to $19.14. So, a long story short with this one, this is a Shadowmoor rare. A lot of the rares from the Lorwyn Shadowmoor block are hard to find at this point due to the fact that they had a lower print run because the demand for the game was a little bit lower during that time period. And this is a decent modern card. I mean, it sees some sideboard play here and there, and it started to dry up in the marketplace. And once that happened, folks started to take notice. Players started to think, wow, I better get my copies because I don't have them. I'd like to have them for the future. And this spiked pretty hard. This is probably an indicator of what could happen to a number of cards from that time period of Magic. So keep an eye out for any cards from especially the Lorwyn, Morningtide, Shadowmoor, Eventide period of time that you're interested in that are rares, because there's a good chance if they're affordable today, they could start to creep up over time. And this is a perfect example of that. Coming in number 4 is Tezzeret the Seeker, up $407 to $14.99. This in particular is the Modern Masters 2015 version. I think there's a couple things going on with Tezzeret here. First off, there's again speculation around all these new artifacts coming to us from the Kaladesh block, and will somebody find a way to brew something in either Modern or Legacy with Tezzeret? And there's a good chance that that could happen. Also, though, Tezzeret is seeing, I think, an increased amount of play right now in Commander, too. So, between the fact that this is a really good Commander card based off a lot of the new cards we have received in the last few months, as well as the fact that there's some speculation that this could maybe pan into something more, definitely seeing a little bit of an increase. And again, if you check out the marketplace, another card that's starting to get a little bit hard to find. Coming in at number 3 is Retract, up $547 to $14.99, another key part of the Cheerios deck. Coming in at number 2 is Karn Liberated from New Pyrexia, up $933 to $59.50. Karn's been on for a couple weeks now, and with Gitaxian Probe being banned, that means that the metagame's slowing down a little bit in Modern, so a lot of folks are going to mid-range decks, and one of the popular foils for mid-range decks traditionally has been Tron, and because of that, some of these Tron cards definitely gaining value. And finally, coming in at number 1, Mox Opal, Modern Masters 2015 version, up $535 to $52.06, with Scars of Mirrodin going up $13.42 this week to $16.29. Well, as you can imagine, guess what? There's some Cheerios decks looking for this. And also, this is already a key staple in Modern with Affinity, right? As not to mention other formats like Legacy and even Vintage. So this card is going to be highly sought after. Potentially, it could get a reprint in Modern Masters. I kind of hope it does. But even so, there's just so much attention on the card right now that people are just ignoring that fact and are just trying to pick it up. Especially that Scars version, really increasing by quite a bit this week. That's a very impressive increase. Now, whenever you see a big spike like this, it will stabilize. And the other uncertainty here is the fact that this Cheerios deck is very popular. It's garnering a lot of attention. It's yet to put up a big finish in a big tournament, though. So if it doesn't do that soon, expect some of these cards to start to fall back down. It has all the potential in the world to do so, and if it does, then these cards could get even hotter. But at least at this time, we're still kind of waiting to see long-term what's going to happen with the deck. All right, let's move on to Legacy. And Legacy, a lot of similar cards the last couple of weeks, a few different ones in there, but let's jump in and look at the cards that lost value this week. Coming in number 5, Jazam Jin, down 1128 to 449.96. This was on here last week as well, but this card sits between 450 and 500. Actually, a very popular card for those that play 93-94 formats. Very powerful in that format, and there's only one option to get it, and that's Arabian Nights. Coming in number 4 is Volcanic Island, down 1276 to 449.96. This, of course, is the unlimited version. Coming in number 3 is Howling Mine from Unlimited, down $13 to $82. This card spiked really hard over the last couple of weeks, so you're going to see it decline back down now, and I would consider that this card is going to probably continue to go down even more so than it has this week. We've seen a lot of these weird spikes and drops when it comes to some of these unlimited cards, and there's a couple of reasons for it. I think one of the main reasons is just simply the fact that a lot of collectors out there like to collect some old cards. And when you think about the rarest cards of Magic, you're talking about Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, Arabian Nights, and Antiquities, basically. And then, okay, maybe Legends. But once you get beyond that, print runs start to go up quite a bit more. And when you get to Revised, when you get to even the Dark and Fallen Empire and such, right? So there's a big focus from the collector market on some of these cards. And especially collectors that maybe are getting priced out of Alpha and Beta are moving on to Unlimited because it's just another option to pick up some rare cards that are a piece of Magic history, right? The other option is some folks like to trick out their decks and go for some of these older style cards. And that could be for Commander, that could be for the 93-94 format. This particular card is more of a collector's gem, I think, than anything else. And I think you're going to see that at least with one other card we're going to talk about later. Okay, coming in at number 2 is Underground Sea, down 1386 to 326.99. This is the revised version. Spiked a couple weeks ago, so it's just stabilizing now. And coming in at number 1 is Nether Void, down 1556 to 288.17. This was a card that was a victim of a buyout a number of months ago. This is actually up around the 320 or more mark at one point. So these have been reintroduced into the market and it continues to drop, getting a little bit closer to where it was before the buyout. All right, let's move on to the cards that have gained value this week in Legacy. Coming in number 5 is Gravity Spear, up 445 to 25.16. Now, this is a perfect example of a card that I think is actually undervalued for a few reasons. It's from Legends. It's never been reprinted. It's on the reserve list. It's actually kind of a fan favorite card and does see play in Commander as well as 93-94 format. It's actually pretty good there. And again, it's a card that you don't have any other options for. So you have to gravitate to, no pun intended, this version of Gravity Sphere. So yeah, if I could find these cards for $20-$25 and I was interested in just holding on to them for the future to either play with them or maybe I wanted one for my Commander deck, I actually don't think that's a bad deal. As a matter of fact, because this is spiking relatively heavily, when I added this to the Amazon affiliate store link, the links I found for this card were actually selling it for around $11, $12. So I was tempted to pick it up myself, quite honestly, but I really don't have a need for it. So I hope somebody takes advantage of the deal because this card does have a lot of potential for the future. Coming in at number 4 is Crusade from Unlimited, up 468 to 29.56. This is a card that was reprinted in Revised as well as 4th, 5th, 6th edition, and it also got a printing in one of the dual decks. So there's other options out there if you're just looking to pick up this card to play with. But again, this is not a reserve list card. That's definitely worth noting. Coming in at number 3 is Underground Sea from Unlimited. This one going up $7.60 to $548.06. Coming in number 2, Gauntlet of Might up $807 to $200. This card will probably stick around that $200 mark, I think, quite easily. This is an unlimited version, obviously, but this card was not reprinted and revised. So because of that, you don't have a lot of options to pick this up, whether you want it for 93-94 format, which is actually really good there, or if you want to pick it up just to have for your collection, or maybe even for Commander. I don't think this card is going to be going down much from this price point. And coming in at number 1 is the Tabernacle at Pendrell of $41.01 to $12.30.99. This was going down over the last few weeks, but stabilized back up again. It really sits right around the $1,200 mark pretty consistently. All right, having said that, that is the Market Watch for this week. Hopefully you find the information helpful, and early this coming week, either probably Monday, as long as there's not a whole lot of other news that I have to report on or anything like that, I'll be doing a special edition where we're going to focus just on Aether Revolt cards, and we'll kind of see how they survived after Pro Tour weekend. Having said that, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.